Hello, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 19th of April. Yesterday, I was talking about Brene Brown, a social worker, researcher, and storyteller who talks a lot about shame and vulnerability and really helping people to understand sort of the way we think and how we go about living our lives the best we can. And part of that, all that time I spent the last week or so on the computer where I had time to listen to podcasts. Um, Another thing that I picked up from her was a sentence she said. She was talking to the interviewer about, sort of when you have this plan, you're doing your thing, you have to do something, you want to get something done, and she said, and then everything goes straight sideways, like it just doesn't work. Plan A, it didn't happen. But she said sometimes you have to plan B it. You have to get it done, even if you have to plan B it. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, I've thought of the concept of, when something happens over here and you're heading down here and you have to take a detour, that's like a plan B, right? Like your plan A was to go straight from your house to the grocery store, but when say the train is coming and it won't ever end, you have to take a detour, you take plan B. It doesn't stop you from getting to your end goal. It just means you take a different route. But how many of us really start to sort of think about that when we're, sort of going through life? And I realized because of my husband, because of the military training he has and the way he has taught me at home, um, we have we have this whole. Always get it wrong. I think it's an American thing, but he talks about adapt, improvise, and overcome, or overcome, improvise, and adapt, or something. And essentially what he means when he says it is that when something happens and it means that you can't follow through in your plan A, that doesn't give you permission to curl up in a ball and say, "Oh well, life is over. I can't do it. I guess I'm not gonna do it." No, it doesn't work that way. Nothing in life works that way. Every time we need to do something, even if something goes completely haywire, we still have to get it done. We can, curl up in a ball and moan and cry about it for a while, but we're just wasting time. Or we can figure out how to overcome it, how we can adapt and how we can improvise. I really do wish I could remember the order of that, but I know what it means. When something happens in our lives, when something, and I don't mean just like going to the grocery store, but I mean something big. For instance, okay, I'll use this as a for instance. When my husband was posted to Petawawa, we were in Halifax for 7 years, and I had a great job. Wonderful church, good people, full time employment. We had a house, a big, huge, gorgeous house to live in. Didn't have to pay our utilities. Didn't get paid a lot, but everything was good. We were making ends meet. And it got comfortable. And a lot of things happened in our lives while we were there. And we got used to recognizing that we can't respond to emergencies back home in Ontario immediately. We have things we have to do. We have people we have to contact and jobs to rearrange and arrangements, like travel arrangements, if possible, to take care of. And it really taught me a lot about taking a deep breath when something happens and then figuring out how to deal with it. Rob was deployed a lot in that 7 years. Same thing, go from being a housewife when we were in Borden, and he was just always there. For the most part, if something happened, he could fix it, and then he was gone. And okay, now what? You improvise, you overcome, you adapt, you overcome, or however that goes. Well, when we moved to Petawawa, we were all excited. We found a place to live. There were not many places in Petawawa we could afford to live, but we found this beautiful townhouse out on a lake that was like way cheaper than we thought we would have to pay. Um, the dog could run around. We could go swimming. We could put the boat in. We had enough space. It was pretty small, but we had enough space for the three of us because my stepson was living with us then, and it was peaceful. It was quite idyllic, actually. There was one hiccup though. The Anglican church in the area there were many of them. There were 14 different churches within an hour's driving distance of where we lived. But they already had priests and they didn't need any more paid priests. They were willing to take on some volunteer work, but they didn't have any room for a paid priest. And I kind of freaked out because that in my younger days, my go-to default was to freak out. I learned a lot in Halifax, and I learned a lot that God is good, and sometimes we can't understand God's plan B for us. And so I took a deep breath and recognized, okay, we've got employment insurance, and that'll hang on for a little while. In the meantime, I'll look for a job and we'll see what happens. I volunteered at the church. We moved out to Round Lake. We're 40 minutes away from Petawawa, where Rob worked, so it was a long drive back and forth, but it was beautiful in the mountains. The four seasons, oh heavens, the colors. If you've never been to the Ottawa Valley in the fall, you really need to go. We were so close to Algonquin Park. It was absolutely idyllic. It was beautiful to see the ducks on the loons on the lake, right, like 40 feet from our front, from our deck, our porch, to see the beavers and to see the turtles, and then to see the ice begin to form and people out ice fishing, and then the ice cracking and the coming of spring and summer. Just absolutely beautiful. Whole time I didn't work. And after we were there for about 8 or 9 months, I started to panic a little bit. What am I going to do? I've got to get work. And then we found out that Rob was going to be posted somewhere in Alberta. And he got his posting message. And I realized, had I gotten a job, we would have been in a particular predicament because I would have had a contract and I would have had to stay. And he would have gone without me for a little while, called IR, imposed restrictions. And it would have really thrown our lives into a bit of turmoil. But looking back on that, I can see the way that God's hand was working. That God's was saying to me, Rachel, 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 dear, dear child, silly, silly child, your plan A is short-sighted. It's not going to work. You're not just automatically going to move to this new place in Petawawa and get a job. It's all going to be perfect because your perfect isn't good enough. God's perfect is so much better than ours. And that plan B that God had in mind gave me a year. It turned out to be 13 months to pray and to meditate and to do some writing and to do a lot of driving. I drove my stepson back and forth to work 3 or 4 nights a week. He worked nights at McDonald's. It was a 40-minute drive into town and 40 minutes back during COVID, with only one washroom that was available for the public. It was fun, not so much. But all of that driving, the beautiful stars I saw at night when I was driving, the moose that I did not run over, but had got to sit and talk to for 3 or 4 minutes one night, the sounds of the cicada bugs and the seeing the little eyes glowing in the dark, the number of deer we came across in snowstorms standing on the road, the beauty of the world that God created, I would not have seen had I had a plan A that worked. God's plan B was plan beautiful, plan beneficent, plan breathtaking. And I would never have known it if I had hunkered down, gotten mad, and forced my way into a plan A. Sometimes, sometimes life just messes up. Sometimes things just go sideways and it's not any grand purpose. It just happens. Sometimes that just happens and we have to deal with it. We have to have a plan B. And plan B may not be better than plan A. But sometimes our plans, all the plans of mice and men, all the plans that we make, maybe they're not big enough. Maybe our plan A needs God to walk in and improvise, overcome, and adapt. Maybe God is saying to us, there's something that you need to learn, or there's things that you learned along the way that you need to put into place. Plan B was beautiful. And so when I never heard it this way, but when Brene said to the interviewer, he said, something, got to get this done, even if I have to plan B it. It's like, wow, absolutely. We have to live the life God's calling us to live, even if we plan B it. Now, the plan B might be the plan B that we create, but sometimes the plan B is the plan B that God creates. And when it is, buckle up because it's going to be an amazing ride. So anybody, if you haven't seen Brene Brown stuff, you've got to watch her stuff. It's really fantastic. She's so down to earth and normal. Um, and what she's saying is practical and easy to understand. But be prepared to plan B it. It is so worth it. I'm actually beginning to think, what might plan C look like one of these days? Have a great day, everybody. God bless you. And thank you for joining me at Church at Home with Rachael.